This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome once again to The Clash. My name is Jeff Dixon. I am one of your hosts, but more importantly, we have another host. It's
Chris Whaley.
And together we are taking a Christian worldview and allowing it to clash into the world that we live in and see if at the end of it we can make any sense out of it and come away with a little bit of foolishness, but hopefully a whole lot of wisdom. Now, Chris, I'm excited about today, though, because there's a friend of yours that you're going to introduce here, and we're going to get a chance to talk with him.
Right. You know, you meet a lot of great people in professional wrestling. You meet some that's not so great, but Alex he's one of the greats, and been a great help to me in my my walk, and I'm just thankful to have him as a friend. And I'm excited about the opportunity to talk with him.
That's going to be fantastic. Well, listen, we're going to talk to Alex right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in just a minute. Hi, Jeff Dixon. You might recognize me from The Clash, but that's not what I want to talk to you about. I want to invite you to visit a website. It's touchandchange.net. Touchandchange.net. That is the website for the ministry of the church at 434, where I am the pastor. Chris Whaley is one of our pastors on staff. And so while you're familiar with us, you may not be familiar with some of the resources that we have to offer that we think will help you in your journey of faith. And you can find all sorts of stuff there with brand new programming that's released every night at 7 o'clock. And you can join us for worship live each and every Sunday morning at 9 or 11:15. Or you can watch streaming reruns of those worship services. And you can go back all the way back to when I had dark hair. And so we would love for you to come and join us and be a part of the journey of faith with us at the church at 434 at touchandchange.net.
Hey, back in 1988, early part of the year, I got out of professional wrestling and went to my first church. And so I wrestled a few times after that for benefits and stuff. But really, you know, here I am about to get back into the ring back in 2022. And I hadn't been in the ring in over 30 years. I hadn't even watched wrestling in over 30 years. And here I am going to get back in the ring. I was pretty nervous about that. So I called a friend of mine, Alex Porteau, who was the Pug in WWE. And he had a school over at the other side of Orlando. And I said, man, I need to get back in shape. And is it okay to come over? And he was so gracious. And I went over every week and got in the ring with 20-something-year-olds and came home with bruises and bloody noses and bloody arms and stuff like that. But it was just so neat to get back in. And I'm just excited about having Alex Porteau on The Clash.
Yeah.
Jeff, this is my friend Alex, and I just want you to know he's one of the best guys in the business.
Well, if you know Chris, I'm not going to hold that against you, Alex, but I'm glad to meet you anyway. That's good. I'm going to ask the first question here because, again, I'm a wrestling fan, wrestling geek, love it. Give me the background of the nickname The Pug. How in the world did you end up with that? Where'd that come from?
Well, you know, I didn't come up with that. The WWE creative team did.
Okay.
You know, after I signed with them in 1996, they actually called me back a couple of weeks later after I had flown up there and you know, completed everything. They took us into creations, is what they called it, or creative, designs, and they asked me about everything I'd done, and I gave them all the characters I had ever done in wrestling, and the last thing I told them was, you know, I was an amateur wrestler and 4 years in high school before I got into the wrestling business. And believe it or not, that was the one thing that they grabbed out of all the gimmicks and characters I had done. So they called me and they said, well, we're either going to call you the Pit Bull or the Pug. And I said, okay. And well, at the time there was a guy in WCW down in Atlanta, Craig Pitbull Pittman, I believe what his name. Yeah, that was his name. So I think that they got away from the Pitbull and just went with the Pug. So
Okay.
that was total WWE.
Okay. Now, and again, but as you kind of go through that process, because that's fascinating to me, how they kind of create the character and role. So if I'm remembering correctly, though, they kind of parlayed this where your character would come out and basically you were saying you were coming in with this amateur background, and that was going to be what it took to whip the professional wrestler, because you had a broader background. Am I remembering that right? Is that kind of how y'all played it out?
You're actually pretty spot on. They told me this, that you're going to be amateur wrestling, just coming out of college, and we're going to put you in pro wrestling. So it was almost like a fresh kid coming from amateur right into pro was the idea of the character. Okay. So
yeah.
That's fine.
Well, we both had the opportunity to work for WCCW in Texas. I left early in 1988, and you got to Texas in 1988, right? How was your time in WCCW? Because I know that was when WWE was cranking up big time, and the territories are going out of business, and so. But how was your time there?
I wouldn't trade it for the world. That was the first break I ever got. Skandar Akbar got me that position over there. And I worked with some of the best talent in the world. That's all there was in that locker room at the time. I mean, Al Perez, the Von Erichs, Chris Adams, Jimmy Jack Funk, the Simpson brothers. There was just a lot of guys there that really, really showed me how to work in this business. So, it was a tough territory. I mean, either you knew how to work there or you went to the house, I wouldn't say knew how to work, but knew how to take it, because we were all young. I was 18 when I started there in 1988. But I was trained by a very, very old school guy. And he showed me how to lay it in, and he also showed me how to take it if it was laid in. So it was a great, great opportunity to break in right there.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with the Freebirds, and of course, my favorite, the best guy to work with was Buddy Jack Roberts. I loved working with him, and Iceman King Parsons. Did you ever work against Iceman?
I sure did. Yes, sir. A few times.
Yeah. He was great to work in. You were trained by Jim Starr and Skandar Akbar, right?
I was initially trained by Jim Starr in Bossier City, Louisiana. A lot of people think that Akbar trained me. He didn't. He just basically got me my first break. Now, I did run his school for a few years when I was living in Dallas. As a return favor to him, I would go down and coach his kids a couple of nights a week down at Doug's Gym in downtown Dallas. So maybe a lot of people kind of think that I was training there at the time, but I was actually just giving back to what he had given me, returning the investment.
Right.
What was what got you to the point where you decided this was going to be a career? I mean, as you kind of moved into this thing, what was the journey to get to the moment where you said, this is what I want to do?
Well, it was probably 1984. I was going to Mid-South Wrestling TV tapings in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is one of the hottest territories still to this day. Of course, it's no longer there. But I thought, what a way to make a living, These guys are wrestling 5 nights a week. They're all over, the South and just enjoying life. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity this would be, and I spoke with Jim Cornette a couple of times as a young teenager on the side, of course, because those guys never break kayfabe back then. And I met him. I skipped freshman football practice one day and met him, and before the TV tapings, and we went and had a pizza together. And he didn't smart me up. He just told me, he said, listen, if you're if your high school has a great amateur wrestling team, go ahead and jump into that, get into some weight training, continue to study the guys, in the ring when you're coming down to the tapings, and let's just see what happens. And that's just kind of where things unfolded. Back then you could make a strong living if you made it, and that was my focal point. Okay. So I didn't go to college. As soon as I got out of high school, I got my training in with Jim Starr, and I shot right into world class.
Wow. Hey, how was you were in Puerto Rico from I think 91 to 95. How was your time in Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico was probably the best wrestling knowledge I had ever experienced. It was actually college of pro wrestling for me. That was the first time that I had flown into a territory. I went out there thinking I was coming back on a Monday. I went out on a Wednesday and wrestled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I went in on that Monday to get my check or pay, however it was. And I was getting ready to leave, and Carlos Colon looked at me and said, No, Alex, we want you to stay. And so I ended up staying there for 2 years. And, Puerto Rico was the first place I ever went that there was the heels and the faces were in separate locker rooms, and you had no engagement with each other. There was no opportunity to talk about anything, and you just went out there and worked. And that's how you learn how to work. And that's how I learned how to work. I did it 5 nights a week for 2 years.
Yeah.
And when I came back to Texas, that was actually 91, 92. But when I came back to Texas in 92 for Global, and that's when Michael Hayes and Bill Irwin turned me into the Beach Bully. I was geared up. I was trained really, really good, and perfect timing to come right in for ESPN TV.
Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm thinking it is. I think you won a big championship in Puerto Rico, and that was your wife, right?
Well, you know what? That's exactly right. I did meet my wife.
Yeah.
I thought you were going. Now, I was the youngest at the time, junior champion there, but I did meet my wife there. I met her in the laundry room in my hotel. And when I left there, I looked her right in the eye and said, Hey, it's time for me to go. Would you like to go back with me to Louisiana? And we packed up and left the island.
Yeah. Now, see, Alex, as a pastor, I would say next time you're asked that question about Puerto Rico, you lead with the fact the greatest thing that happened in Puerto Rico is I met my wife. I would think that probably that keeps you out of my office, right? I mean, that's kind of...
You got that right, especially about a Puerto Rican woman.
That's right. That's right. When I heard you rattle off a couple of names, the characters, the personas that you had. I mean, rattle off, if you wouldn't mind, some of the folks that you had been known by over the course of your career. Because again, I started with the Pug, but that's just one I knew. I'm not familiar with the rest.
Well, I broke in Dallas as Alex Porteau. And then Jerry Jarrett gave me my second break in Tennessee. He asked me, he said, Alex, would you like to go to Tennessee and be one of the Dirty White Boys with Tony Anthony? And what an honor that was. And so I went into Nashville, the USWA, and I was one of the Dirty White Boys for several months there. And then I went down to Houston for a little while. And then I got the call from Akbar in Puerto Rico while I was in Houston, and then that's whenever I took off out there. But back to that, it was Alex Porteau, the Dirty White Boys, Alex Porteau in Puerto Rico, and then when I came to Dallas, returning from Puerto Rico, they put me as the Beach Bully, and then I did several Japan tours just under my regular name. And after that, that's whenever I got my break with WWE as the Pug.
Okay. I know one of the groups that you worked for, you won the World Junior Heavyweight Championship and defeated a friend of mine, Ricky Santana, for that, right?
That's right. That was in Puerto Rico. That was the championship I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, well, I had to get that in.
The second best thing that happened there, right? The second best thing.
Yeah. Ricky is great. He really is. I just want to ask you now. I know you train professional wrestlers, and that's kind of changed now in what you do for. So, would you like to tell us exactly what it is you do now in the training of professional wrestlers, and also if one of the listeners would, like to contact you, tell us how they could do that.
Well, I started a business, Pro Wrestling 2.0, here about 7 years ago in Orlando. We had a commercial side there forever, and I'll tell you, we still have the business. But we had too many guys coming in that just weren't genuine athletes that really wanted to be wrestlers, but they could never really be a wrestler. And I'm very old school. I'm very, very hesitant on who I put my name on. And then, you bring these kids in and they pay you, a few $100 a month to have a membership, and you smarten them up, and then they run off in a few months and they still don't really grasp anything because you're really just scratching the surface. And we just had a hard time finding good, genuine athletes that were made for this business anymore. So we actually, we still run the business. Now we're doing more of an online type thing. We do in person as well, but we're more geared now towards guys that are already broke in, that need help with their psychology, character developments, promos, do's and don'ts in the locker rooms and, out on the road. So anyway, we're still, doing very well with it. But you can, we're all over the social media. You can Google us. But we are right here in Orlando, Florida.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, we could just put your email address up on the screen. We could do that?
Sure. Okay. Pro Wrestling 2.0 @gmail.com.
All right. We'll do that. Yep.
Now, Alex, I'm going to hone back in what you were just talking about. Let's say for our audience, if they were interested in being a wrestler, or you were going to sit down and talk with them, give them advice, and say, hey, Alex, I want you to train me. I'm interested in being a wrestler. What is the first question that you use to kind of screen that person? I mean, what does that first interaction look like when you're trying to kind of size somebody up and trying to figure out, do they have what it takes?
What's your age and athletic background?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. When I hear that, that tells me a lot.
Okay.
Have you had any injuries, any surgeries? Have you been around some coaching, some discipline, some weightlifting? All that plays a big part in the process and how long it takes to get guys to be where they need to be. It takes a good 7 years to really learn this business and find out what your fit is and how to get yourself over. Okay. Everybody wants to be John Cena next week, and It just doesn't happen like that. No. This is why we have a big problem with underground promotions running these events, and then these kids leaving these schools way too early and telling guys that they're available to be wrestlers when they're really not. Yeah. And that was one of the hiccups I was really running into. Is guys wanted to train 2 or 3 nights a week, but when you tell them, hey, there's a show Friday 20 miles down the road, let's be there at 4 o'clock to help set up, tear down, and let's be there to honor the promoter and see what we can do to help them. These guys, they wouldn't even show up.
Right.
Yeah. So I would run them out of my school just for not even showing up to a show that wasn't even mine.
Right.
I mean, if I can't rely on you to be there 20 miles down the road, how am I going to rely on you to go take a booking in Miami 250 miles away when you're trained?
Sure.
And it showed me that all they wanted to do was the in-ring stuff. They didn't want to do the grunt work. Yeah. To get where you need to be,
Mm-hmm. That was my second question there, and you just kind of hit at it. What then? I mean, if someone jumps in and says, okay, this is what I want to do. I mean, talk to me a little bit about what kind of commitment does it take to actually go through and do your time, and I mean, What does that process look like? Because I mean, again, it sounds to me like he's got to be all in, and this is not going to be a part-time thing.
That's right. It's, you have to find a job that's daytime. You're off on nights and weekends. You have to have reliable transportation. Okay. You have to invest in gear. You have to invest in promo pictures. You have to invest in your body. You have to finance this business until you make it. It's just like being an actor or a comedian or a musician. These guys don't become those things overnight. Yeah. People go to Nashville and play in clubs for $50 a night just to be seen. Right. How far is that drive? How much is your guitar? What about the equipment? These are expenses. Right. But the best thing that you can get on the road when you're younger is experience. And a lot of these guys talk about, they're just getting a hot dog and a handshake. Well, you know what? They're learning how to work. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can get a hot dog and a handshake going to college. You're not getting paid going to college. You're financing it until you make it. Sure. When you get to NXT or AEW or WWE, then you talk about money. That's when you make money. Right. Too many guys don't understand that it's a process. If you're smart and you have the right character and you know how to get over and you look like something, you'll make more money off your merchandise than you will making shows. Mm-hmm. But we've just got a different breed of kids out there now. These guys are, just because the young bucks come in there and get over without muscles doesn't mean anybody else can. Right. And this is what kind of sparked that generation of guys to come in. Well, the young bucks look like that. I don't need to work out. Yeah. Well, you don't work like the young bucks.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm just glad that I heard you say, if I put my name on it, I want to make sure that it's right. So you're a person of great character. Well, I got to ask you, tell me who was your greatest match you ever had, and tell me your worst match you ever had.
Well, I've had a lot of great matches. I've had a lot of, Kendo Nagasaki in Tokyo. Brett Shaw in the Garden. Gosh, Jim Neidhart in Miami. That was a great one.
Oh, wow.
I worked with Tommy Rogers one night in Dallas, Texas. Had a great match with Tommy Rogers.
Great.
He'd just come off a Japan tour. I worked with Vader in Reunion Arena in Dallas. That was a great match. It wasn't TV, so we were able to kind of go out there and help get each other over. As opposed to TV where they're really getting over much stronger. I worked with the Iron Sheik in Meridian, Mississippi. That was awesome. I've had so many good matches. I've worked with so many top guys. I've learned so much from those guys. Dean Malenko, another good one.
Yeah.
Pitt Finley was one of my favorites.
Yeah. What was your worst one?
Yeah, when I was younger, like 1988, I was doing a few things with WCW just out on the road. Jody Hamilton got me a spot doing those things, those TV tapings. I worked with Kevin Sullivan as he's a taskmaster, and he really put the boots to me one night, and because he was getting himself over, and he threw me outside of the ring, and he threw my head into the post, and I opened up hard way. And, WCW, they knew I was young and right. Just starting out. That was in Cincinnati, Ohio. They actually sent me to the hospital and got me stitches. But I wouldn't say it was my worst, but it was probably just an eye-opener of, what guys can really do to you when they're out there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I want to be on the record. Kevin Sullivan always scared me when I watched him. He always seemed like he was a little bit crazy in the real world. So I want to be on the record about that. I never wanted to meet him. So
yeah, he's actually in pretty bad shape. I think he's a lot better now, but he had a real scare with death.
Did he?
Yeah. Wow. And I think he's in rehab now and doing a lot better. So I'm glad of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Alex, man, we can't thank you enough. Well, you got anything else there?
No, Alex, I mean, we're getting ready to wrap this up, but I mean, this for me, this has been fun. I mean, this was great. And I appreciate you being on with us. For our audience, this is kind of a moment where, any great sage words of advice, wisdom, anything you want them to know before we kind of land this thing and kind of move out of the episode.
If I could do it all over again, I mean, I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't. Of course, we're in a different time now. Now, in today's world, I would probably get an education first and start get in there and get young, or start young, rather. Too many guys try to get in this business at a late time. When I ask your age and athletic background, they tell me I'm 28, I'm 32, and I'm like, well, you know what? I hear your heart, but it's kind of late. Mm-hmm. When you're 28, 32 years old, life's already set in. You may be married, you may have kids, you got a lot of financial obligations. When you're 18 and 19, you don't have the same obligations, and you could coach kids better at that age. So start young. You get about a 10-year run in this business. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to start when you're 30 and be banged up at 40. Right. Because starting when you're 30, it's going to take you 37 to find yourself, and then you'll be 47 if you make it, with a 10-year run. So, I started when I was 16, and I knew what I was doing really when I was about 21, 22, and that's a great time to come in, Yeah, that's what I would say.
It's been so great having you, Alex. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and God bless you, buddy, and you keep sticking by the stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to meet with you guys today, and God bless you both, okay?
Thanks, Alex. Good to see you.
Appreciate you.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was fun. Thank you. Thank you for introducing us to your friend Alex. Thank Alex for being on here. One of the things I'm struck by is what it takes to make it in the wrestling industry, the training that you really have to commit to the process of getting it done. I think that equates to other areas of life too, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the training in professional wrestling, Alex talked about some of the organizations now that are doing wrestling and how bad it is. I never got to get in the ring until I had been, working for 6 months in training. I mean, the training was so important, and it's so awesome because you know what you're doing when you get into the ring. So the same thing, Jeff, is with our Christian walk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to just happen. I mean, it's not metamorphosis. It takes work. I mean, it takes work being in God's Word. It takes work taking God's Word and putting it into action. It takes work when you take God's Word, you learn from it, and even when you make mistakes, you go back and you have the opportunity for a do-over. Sure. And God is so gracious to us with those do-overs, and I'm very thankful for that. But actually in the Christian walk, Jeff, I guess I'll let you say something about this, but the Christian training doesn't stop until we check out.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a lifetime commitment to it. And I think that's really one of the reasons that people struggle with it. We just don't have the discipline that we need. We don't approach it that way. But I think that mindset really does matter so much. And I think that even as we were talking to Alex, that's one of the things I was hearing from him, just that the mindset it takes to be successful, the work ethic and all of that. And I think there's a lot of spiritual lessons that we can all learn from that. And so that's why I'm grateful that you introduced us to Alex, and glad that he can be with us on the class today. I think we're about done, and we're getting ready to leave here, but we have one more piece of advice for you before we invite you to join us next week. Chris?
Don't tap out.